Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and I know it's very likely that you've played the same game of tug-of-war with your body as I have over the years. Counting calories, white-knuckling restrictions, shaming yourself, and chasing a version of yourself that most of the time feels out of reach. If you're nodding, let me remind you that you're not alone. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if the path out of that cycle isn't about more willpower or another set of rules, and instead it's about relearning how to trust yourself again? Today's guest, Joanne Edinberg, is here to talk about just that. A perspective rooted not in diets or discipline, but in wisdom, compassion, and the idea that challenges with food and body aren't problems to be fixed, but lessons to help us grow. Joanne is a certified eating psychology coach and the founder of Body Wisdom Nutrition, where she supports women in transforming their relationship with food and body. She has a BS in psychology from Tufts University, a master's degree in social work from Boston University, and a certification in eating psychology coaching. Drawing from a background in social work, yoga, and labor doula support, Joanne brings an intuitive, trauma-informed lens to her work. Through her 12-week program, she helps health-conscious women move from stress, guilt, and shame to curiosity, compassion, and joy. Her mission is clear: to help women end the quest for the perfect diet and the perfect body so they can reclaim the energy and space to live more fully. Joanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that introduction. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. It's always a topic or an area of focus that gets lots of discussion, lots of listens, because I think what I said is true. So many of us have experienced this either their whole life or at least at some point in their life. I don't think it's a stretch to say that that's the majority. I would love to start us off by having you tell us how you got here, because I can't imagine that you always thought that this was the path. That whole tug-of-war cycle was something that you could move past just by changing up the way you looked at it. Tell us a little bit about your journey here and sort of, was there a pivotal moment that shifted that for you?
Yeah, thanks. You're right. I mean, I think there's not many of us that escape this journey, right? Especially as women. And, I guess, I can't really remember a time, maybe when I was real little, but certainly as a teenager, I was never comfortable in my skin and always felt very self-conscious about my body. And, I had a slim body when I was younger. I never really even had to worry about how much I weighed, and I wasn't focused so much on that at that time. But I think, one of the pivotal times was, in my 20s, I was having really bad really bad allergies, period. I didn't know if they were related to food, but I eventually got to this point of being tested and had a lot of food sensitivities. So ended up changing my diet drastically. And, on the one hand, really saw the power of food as medicine. On the other hand, I think it was that turning point where my relationship with food really took a turn for the worse, because I started seeing food as the enemy. I started labeling foods as good foods, bad foods, healthy foods, unhealthy foods. And every time I would have a symptom, even though my allergies got a lot better, from having this very restrictive diet, I started really being obsessed about everything I ate. And every time I'd have a symptom, I would think, oh, it must have been something I ate. And especially with food sensitivities, as opposed to like, severe allergies, you don't really see the connection like immediately after you eat something.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
So that I think it was very stressful to eat. Actually, I didn't enjoy eating anymore in a lot of ways, and it was a lot about trusting these outside experts to know what I should or shouldn't eat. And I think it was when I actually did my training to become an eating psychology coach. I think that was the biggest turning point, and I had so many ahas trying to really understanding what the root was for trying to shift my relationship with food, and seeing how many things are relevant that have nothing to do with the food themselves, or with exercise, or with weight. And the whole issue of stress versus relaxation, that sympathetic versus parasympathetic response, is critical. And I don't really hear a lot of people talking about that. But I realized you can eat the healthiest food in the world if you're eating in a state of stress, or if you have a lot of low level stress in your life, which many of us do, then you're not going to be able to digest your food properly. You're not going to be able to metabolize well. And so that whole issue really came to light for me, and it was like big light bulb. And I think that's a big piece of what I do in terms of my work with women, is trying to figure out, well, what are the stressors in your life, and how can we relax with food, with eating, with our bodies, with our weight, because those things are actually going to impact our bodies more than just counting, like you said, counting calories,
Yeah.
or you know burning this many calories by doing this much exercise, or eating this type of food, or counting our macros. And I'm not saying that, I mean, all of those things can be important. They're pieces, but it's certainly not the whole picture.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you hit on a bunch of those things, because it is often so much bigger than just with air quotes, the foods that we eat. For me, I personally think that in most cases, it is about much more. And I think the research is starting to come out to show that. I think there's genetic factors, there's biology, there's activity level, environment, certainly the stress factors you're talking about. I think for most of us, it's all interconnected. And I think as people start to sort of unravel all of that, it becomes a little bit clearer. That said, if we bring our focus back to the food and our relationship with the food, I'm curious, you mentioned that specific time for you and how that probably shifted your own relationship. Do you think that most people have a significant thing, I'll say thing, event, message that happened to them that they carry forward that they may not even know about, but that blocks them from getting past some of this? Do you think most of us have that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, what I love to do is really dig deep and try to get at the root of all of these issues. And I think that's the only way we can actually transform, how we see our bodies, and our weight, and our issues around food. And so, absolutely, I mean, there's so many, beliefs that we develop, based on both our upbringing and, culturally. And, emotions are so much of a part of these issues. And so, really tapping into potentially like stuck emotions can have a huge impact on all of these issues, and getting at the root of that, and really getting in touch with our bodies and how we're feeling, and being present. I think it's so easy to just, be in our heads and not be in our bodies. And, you can think all sorts of things, and that's not generally what's going to make the changes. Although, I mean, our beliefs definitely are a big part of it, because I feel like our mind is incredibly powerful, right? And so what we believe can definitely manifest. So being able to change those beliefs can be very powerful. But yeah, I think there's always bigger issues that underlie all of these challenges. And I see them as really positive things, because like I think you talked about on your website, our messes can become our greatest messages. I love that because especially issues around food and weight and body image. They're things we can't really avoid. And so they're great messengers to us, that really get our attention and help us figure out, what might be underlying our challenges.
How do you, so when you're working with people, and I'm going to ask you several things and try to turn them into, practical ways people can walk away and make some changes. And as you talked through that, I think a lot of us get to a place where we feel like we're broken. The messaging has been there, right? And so do you have any suggestions to start shifting that to tie back into, our mess, if you will, or our journeys or our struggles, whatever, they can all become our message. But how do you get people to tap into that and shed the brokenness label and sort of see that that's just a story and to start looking at it differently and understanding there's value there versus it being something that's limiting?
Yeah, I think it's really challenging. But from my perspective, the way that I work with clients and myself is kind of taking every issue and looking at it as an opportunity to grow and learn, as opposed to a problem to be solved. That there isn't anything wrong with us. There's always a good reason for anything we do. So, for example, like if someone will come to a session and say, oh, say it's Halloween and I ate the whole bowl of candy, right? It's
That's
like,
never happened to
no, I know, we
anybody,
don't
has
know
it?
really. That's hypothetical
Yeah, of
situation.
course.
But,
Asking for a friend.
right. I love those kinds of situations because they happen all the time, first of all. And it's like, okay, so let's get into that. How did you feel after that happened? And really tap into the guilt, the shame. Those are the things that usually come up. And, really feel in your body, whether it's in that moment or after the fact, like trying to take a look at that, okay, well, what's that about? Like, where did that come from? And why do you think you feel that way? Like you just ate some food. Like it's not, this horrible transgression. And, being able to shift into like, okay, if you can understand why you do those things, that's where you can kind of change from thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me, I'm broken. It's like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. No wonder I do that. Like these are all the situations that happened, growing up, all the messages that I got that, make me feel that way. But you can shift that. I think it's like being able to actually feel those feelings and understand where they come from. That's what creates the shift, because if we don't, most of us didn't really learn to express our feelings or even being in touch with what we're feeling in any given moment, or know how our body feels, when we're upset, when we feel that shame, when we feel guilt, when we're anxious. So being able to get present with those moments and knowing how it feels, what your body feels like emotions actually are just energy in motion. We need to let them flow through our body. Otherwise they get stuck. And so surprisingly, it only takes like 30 seconds, a minute and a half for an emotion to actually flow through the body, which seems crazy, right?
Yeah.
You think, oh, it's never going to end. I don't want to feel that because it's going to be so hard. But it's the thoughts about the feelings that make it so hard for us to want to be present with them. But it's like a practice learning how to do that. You realize, okay, this is just a feeling. Like everyone has feelings. It is not a problem. I'm not broken. It's actually a good thing to feel our feelings. It's suppressing the feelings that become problematic. Even things like weight can be, suppressed emotions, suppressed energy that we're not expressing. Like there's so many things that weight or our body image issues or any of these things can represent. It is so much bigger than, oh, I just ate the wrong thing, or I'm eating too much, or, I ate too many carbs, or whatever. Like it's so much deeper than that. So
how do you get people to start unraveling that, because I think it's easy. To your point, it happens all the time. People say, yeah, I ate the whole bowl of candy, or I ate the whole bag of chips, or I had, the whole sleeve of cookies, whatever it is. We've all heard the stories
Mm-hmm.
or done it ourselves. And I think for many of us, we do have that moment after the fact, to your point, shame, guilt. Maybe we even feel yucky because we ate that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think where people struggle is what to do with that, how to make that provide an insight that might help them going forward.
Yeah.
So can you share anything that you might advise somebody you're working with on questions to ask, action to take,
Mm-hmm.
things to do that will help them start really looking at that from a different perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of strategies that you can use, and it's different what works for everyone. But, that awareness is really key. Just kind of
Mhm.
noticing after you eat something you think you shouldn't have eaten. Notice how you feel. Notice the thoughts going through your head. Journaling is something I like to do with my clients. I think it can be very helpful to actually get the ideas on paper.
Yeah.
Um, just because like when it's your mind is spinning, it's really hard to get out of that. But if you start writing it down, even just like stream of consciousness, it can really take the power away from it. And you don't have to read it later, you don't have to save it. It's just like getting it out. And you can actually get, I think, to some deeper levels just by writing, because you start to, you can actually feel the feelings or notice what emotions are going on, like what's going on in my body, like, take note of those things. Um, just getting present, like with eating, for example. That's a lot of what I'll do with clients is, developing some strategies around being mindful, being conscious when you're eating, like eat when you eat, as opposed to multitasking,
Yeah.
which most of us do, right?
Yeah.
We're watching TV, we're looking at our phone, we're in the car eating or whatever, we're on the phone. I'm not saying that any of those things are bad. It's just, the more we can be very present, we can really notice what's happening. We can notice, if you slow down, like all of these things put us in that relaxation state where we can be calm about it. We can, when you binge eat, that's actually a stress response. Like it's hard to binge eat when you're relaxed because, when you're calm, you can be more mindful of what you're eating, and you can eat however much you want, right? But there's no like goal there. It's just noticing. And I think a lot of people do realize like, oh yeah, I wasn't actually hungry anymore, or I didn't feel like eating anymore once I actually was paying attention, using all your senses, the smells, the taste, the feeling of it, is it crunchy or whatever. Really taking the time to be very present while you're eating. And if you can't do it while you're eating, you know, think about that later. Like, oh, that's interesting that I wasn't able to do that, that I actually was eating. I just ate this whole bowl of whatever, and I didn't even know that I was eating.
Yeah.
That's very common. How many of us actually sit and pay attention when we're eating? So I think that can be very helpful to kind of break those cycles and to be able to become aware of our patterns, which, most of us have. Most of us are very fast eaters, which in and of itself is kind of a stressful uh,
Yeah.
response.
Yeah. I do think
So,
awareness is always the first thing. I mean,
mhm.
to anything you're trying to change is to really have awareness of what you're doing. I think that for so many people who have struggled with this, it's probably hard to even, I guess, get a feeling for what a good relationship with food in your body would look like. I
Mhm.
don't know if people even understand that when we put
Right.
that out there and you say, you need to work on, or the goal is to get freedom so that you have a stronger relationship, or a good healthy relationship with food and with your body. Tell our listener, like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me in particular, it's first of all, enjoying food,
Mm,
really being able to see food as something that is nourishing. It's supposed to be nourishing. It's supposed to be comforting. I find it interesting, like all this talk about these weight loss medications. And I am not,
I was going to
I
ask you.
yeah, I feel like, it's everyone's choice what they want to do. I'm a
Mhm.
really big believer in choice and doing what's best for you and really experimenting with what works.
Same.
But a lot of the side effects of those drugs are that we actually lose our appetite and we lose our ability to enjoy food. At least that's what I've heard. I haven't taken them, so I don't know personally. But to me, that feels very uh, like against what food is supposed to represent, right? It's food is such a big part of our culture, and we can't live without food, and it's supposed to be enjoyable. And so, another piece of, to me, having a good relationship with food is like seeing that food is not the enemy. It's not a moral issue, like eating this food or that. Like foods don't have morality to them. They're just
Yeah.
neutral. And being able to eat anything at any time, I think is part of having a good relationship with food. Like not thinking that having all these restrictions, like I can never, I mean, of course, if you have real food allergies or whatever, that's different. But in general, like not having so much rigidity and restriction about what's okay to eat or not okay to eat, because, different situations in our lives, I think, you know, it, I think if you have a very open relationship with food, I guess, um, there isn't that need to binge or crave things because you always have the option to eat that thing. Like the power comes when we restrict, when we're not allowed to do something that, subconsciously kind of makes us want to do it more.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
having that openness, and it's different for everyone, but I think there's a lot of what I see and hear is a lot of this idea that as long as we can kind of control what, the food we have in our house or the situations we're in, like I'll eat before I go to this event because then I won't be tempted or whatever, right? I think that actually is the opposite of being able to trust ourselves. Like I think we actually can trust ourselves with food no matter what. And we get this message that we can't, and we've learned that for many, many decades, probably,
Yeah.
right? Like when we're born, I think we can trust ourselves with food. We know how much
Yeah.
we need. So we've gotten all these messages. And so like unraveling that and getting to that place where we trust ourselves again. And it can take a while because especially if we've been dieting for many, many, many years, like it's going to take a while to rebuild that trust, just like rebuilding trust with any person or anything. So it's trusting the process and kind of seeing what happens. And again, like noticing, being aware what happens when you do this, when you allow yourself to have whatever food it is in your house that you think you shouldn't have, or going to a party and eating the cake or whatever it is. Um, just kind of noticing it and seeing how you feel. Because to me, that's the best barometer is how do you feel? And just constantly noticing that. And it can be different. Like you could eat the same exact food and feel differently depending on the situation, depending on what's going on in your life, depending on what kind of event you're at, rather than, you're home by yourself alone or whatever. So yeah, I guess that's a long answer, and it's complicated, and it's probably
Yeah.
different for everyone. But it is that kind of feeling comfortable around food in particular, um, and not feeling stressed and worried all the time. Like, what should I eat? How much should I eat? Oh, I need to intermittent fast, so I can't eat before this time.
Yeah.
It's after 6 p.m. I should, like that's a very stressful way to live, I think.
Yeah. It's not having all the rules.
Yeah. And I mean, like, again, you can experiment if those things work for you. That's great. I don't have, a one right way for everyone. It's just kind of looking at it all like, why are you doing these things? Are you doing it because you're afraid that if you don't, you're not going to be healthy or you're going to gain weight or whatever it is? as opposed to, no, I actually am choosing to do that because it feels really good for me.
Yeah. Well, you used the word healthy, so let's go there for a minute. I think for many of us, again, we've been messaged, we've received messages that you need a thin body.
Mm-hmm.
You need a fit, thin body to be healthy. And so, how do you suggest that people start building their own image of what health looks like, their own picture, and sort of bunking the system, if you will, and kind of making that their own decisions about that and sort of proceeding in a way that supports their version of what health can look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because there is so much emphasis on, thin bodies. And if you look at the research, there's lots of research out there, which really doesn't quite get into the mainstream.
Yeah.
But, Health at Every Size is a great book that has a lot of studies in it. And there was a whole study called Health at Every Size that talks about health and weight and the relationship or lack thereof between weight and health. It's pretty much a given. Most people think, well, clearly weight and health are directly related. And it's actually not true.
Yeah.
And being active definitely is important for health. I think I will agree with that. And I think a lot of the research shows that. But it doesn't matter what size your body is. If you're active, whether you have a large or small body, that's way more important for your health. But there are so many things that impact our health beyond size, for sure, and weight, what we're eating, how much we're exercising, even though, again, those things may come into play. But if you look at like the blue zones, for example, if you've heard of that, like places in the world where more people live to be 100 than other places. There's so many things that are part of their lifestyle that don't have to do with food or exercise. It's being part of a community. It's spending a lot of time outside in the fresh air. It's walking as part of your life, having a sense of purpose. Those things I think are probably more important than this, these other components when it comes to health. And I do believe the bottom line is like, how do you feel? That's always the question. Like, how do you feel? And so I do a lot of work with people coming up with things, and this relates to kind of that stress relaxation response too, because the things that bring you joy, that provide purpose, that give you connection, make you happy, pleasure, all of those things put you in the relaxation response. And so coming up with things that make you feel that way, whether it's activities, people, places, really working on bringing more of that into your life and taking out the things that drain your energy, that make you feel uncomfortable, that, some things we have more control over than others. But, I think that's really much more the key to all of these issues. And it goes way beyond, like we were saying, food and exercise, which is what most people focus on, maybe because they're easier to control, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that that's not necessarily the case from
Right,
what I've
think
seen,
we can.
what I've experienced and what I've
Right.
seen. But yeah, we think we can. I'm thinking about women in middle age, women specifically. I guess it could be anybody middle aged, but I've heard, I don't know if you've heard this too, but I think that middle aged women often feel like it's the most difficult to manage their weight in that period of time. But I also think, from my own experience and from some that I've heard or worked with, that it's also a liberating time. It's a time where we finally start to maybe push back on some of the norms, maybe push back on some of the noise, start reinventing ourselves and also what we believe. And so I'm just curious if you see the same thing. And so it's sort of that dichotomy of this can be the most difficult time, but it can also be the most freeing and liberating time. Do you see that? Have you witnessed that?
I definitely think that's true, especially if you kind of can reframe your mindset, around some of these issues and learn a little bit about it, like whether it's important or not. But yes, I mean, that's why I love working with women at this stage of life because, many women spend so much of their earlier life, raising kids, just being so busy trying to manage their life and taking care of other people that I feel like at this point in our life, we can start to really focus on ourselves and focus on what's important
Yeah.
and what really makes us happy, what
Yeah.
really brings us joy, and maybe that other stuff is not so important, even though it's hard because it's still all around us. But I do feel like, yes, it is true. It can be, gaining weight at this time of life, like during perimenopause, menopause, it does seem to be true
I agree.
for a lot of
Yeah.
women, right? And the question is that, is that a problem to be solved? Is there something wrong with you? Or is that actually supposed to be the way it happens? Or maybe it's like now that you have time to focus on yourself, if there is a message there, you're able to actually focus on it. Like, what is this trying to tell you, this change in your body? Is it just be more compassionate and kind and accepting of ourselves no matter what? That could very well be a possible
Yeah.
message. And all the things that people talk about, especially since so much of the research is done on men, first of all. Is it true or is it true? Like, is it true that this is a problem to be solved? Weighing more, having more belly fat, whatever. I'm not sure, but certainly developing those beliefs that it is a problem is not good for our health,
Yeah.
right? And if you hear it all the time, it's just constant. It's like, oh, maybe that is true. But actually, by experience, it's not true. And a lot of women I work with, it's not true. It doesn't mean that we don't want to try to do things to make us feel better. But I mean, I feel really good right now in this body that is definitely bigger than it was when I was younger. And there's so much about my life that is so much better, on every level, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And, I'm not going to buy into that idea that there's something wrong with me that I need to fix, that my body isn't good enough, that I'm going to hurt my health by these changes when that's not been my experience.
Yeah. It's like, I think there's this like continuum or this, this whole spectrum of where you can be on the journey of where you fit and what you think. Similar to you, I used to be in actually a much bigger body for many, many, many years, and I lost a lot of weight. Am I where my ideal place? No, I'm not. But just like you, I am now at this age of 56 at a spot where I'm like, am I going to let this be the primary focus of every thought and every moment and everything? Because it can be that, right? It can be all consuming.
Exactly.
And no, the conclusion I came to a year or so ago was no. I mean, I will continue always, just like I do with my brain and all the other parts of my life, always try to improve because that's just who I am in general. But I think getting comfortable with who we are, and as long as we're feeling, like you said, listening to your body and you feel good and you're, again, I think it's a spectrum, and I think that's okay. I think it's okay for people to hear that there's not a definitive finish line. You got there and now you're good. Because I think even if you get to that ideal spot, what you hear from many people, and you can tell me if I'm wrong from who you've worked with, there's still work. There's still there. There's still messaging. It's like an ongoing thing. It doesn't just stop because you hit that number on the scale.
Right. Yeah, I think that's true. It's that whole, like, when I get to this place, when I have this much money, when I have this relationship, when I get this job, when I get to this weight, I'll be happy. And, the reality is,
be happy now.
That's not the way it works. Yeah. You can be happy now, no matter what your body is. And if you're not, it's going to be hard to be happy when you get to that new body if you haven't, worked from the inside out. because you're just going to be worried, oh, I'm going to gain the weight back. Or, we can feel, it's like, what do you want to get when you get to that weight? Like, what is it that you want to feel? And you can think of situations where you can feel that way already, right? I want to be comfortable in my clothes. Well, you can buy clothes that you feel comfortable in right now.
Great point.
That's
a great point, because I think that is one of the things. I want to be comfortable in my clothes, or
yes.
I want to have confidence when I walk into a room. So what would you say to that? I mean, you can build that confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like confidence absolutely comes from the inside out. It's something energetic about a person. I mean, they've done studies on this, in terms of attractiveness, what people are attracted to. I mean, it may be like, especially on an app, like a 2-dimensional picture of someone. Okay, that's one thing. But when you're actually interacting with people, you can pick up on their energy. And it doesn't matter what your body looks like. If you don't feel confident, then people are going to pick up on that. And, I think we can probably all think of people who are in larger bodies that exude a lot of confidence. Yeah. And that is actually a very attractive feature. And so I think we just need to think about that, like what actually brings us that feeling of being confident. There's nothing that you need to change about yourself.
I love that.
To get there.
I love that message. What do you think about, so I feel like we shame ourselves and our bodies, honestly, at all sizes.
Agree.
At all sizes. And because I've seen and been witness to some very tiny women, and I am speaking about women, that have had some of the same sentiments as somebody that's in a larger body. So what do you say to the person that maybe they don't even realize, and there's subtle ways that we shame ourselves and others around our body? How do we pick up on that stuff?
Yeah, I think it is really hard because it is so normalized, especially in conversations with other women. Like, we are just constantly criticizing our bodies.
Yeah.
And so I think the first step is just, again, like the awareness, like just try, like say, okay, the next time I'm out with some friends or at work, just notice if there's any of that conversation going on. And at some point you can get to the point of actually saying something about it. It's not easy though, right?
Yeah.
Because it is so normalized. But the reality is like, well, what are you saying about yourself? Like, would you say that to your daughter, or would you say that to your best friend?
Right.
Like, think about how you talk about yourself, and, would you actually treat other people that you care about that way? So I think that's a good way to start thinking about it and reframing it. And, but yeah, it comes from a lot of, feelings of unworthiness that most of us carry with us. And, if we want to shift and feel better about ourselves, that's an important area to look at. And again, like, you can do journaling about it. You can, if you don't like to write, you can just record yourself and just talk about, oh, it was interesting. I said this to myself today, or I noticed other women saying these things, and, just start processing it. And it becomes a lot more easy to notice when you're focusing on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a hard one. I mean, I've been doing this work for a long time, and I've definitely been in situations in groups where there's lots of talk about people's bodies. And it's hard to bring that up, it's just, but we just have to start somewhere. And I think actually, if you do it, like, people appreciate it. Like, I try not to talk about bodies, or when people lose weight, for example, that's a big one, because that happens a lot. It's like, oh my God, you look so good. What did you do? And, what is that actually saying?
Yes.
So I just try not to comment on that at all, ever,
I love that. A story that somebody once told me is that they lost a ton of weight in a very unhealthy way. And it was a result of an eating disorder. And, again, they were really unhealthy. It was just before hospitalization. And somebody said to them, wow, you look really fabulous. And the message there, to your point, is you just don't know. You don't know what's going on. And first of all, the fact that they thought she looked fabulous because she had gotten that thin, there's a lot to say there as well. But it's just an area we probably shouldn't go there just to be, it's such a superficial thing. Like, again, somebody else said to me, it's like commenting on somebody's hair. Like, oh, why is your hair brown instead of blonde? Like, who would say that, I mean, I guess if somebody did a drastic dye job and they've always been blonde, maybe, but I don't know. You just, it's just such a weird thing. But I think we've been brought up in a culture that it's acceptable, and I think everybody does it. So starting to change that is a good thing.
Yeah, it's so true. Because I've read a lot of books about this kind of thing, especially with eating disorders. And, there's so much validation when you lose weight. And it just feeds on that. And it can actually create eating disorders, really. But yeah, you never know. Like, someone could have lost a lot of weight because they just went through chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. Or, there's lots of reasons why people lose weight. And yeah, it's good to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, steer away from it. Well, if there's one message, just one out of all the things that you were leaving with our listener, what would it be?
There's so many things, but I guess one of the main things is, okay, especially at this time in our lives when, we really want to be thinking about, like, how do I want to live the rest of my life?
Yeah.
I really think it's just so important to start thinking about these things we've been talking about. Like, can you enjoy your food more? Can you appreciate your body more for what it does for you instead of, constantly criticizing it and focusing on what's wrong? What do you want to think about, like, when you're on your deathbed, how you want to have spent your time, especially around these issues. It's like, what really matters, and just focusing your time on what really brings you pleasure, what really makes you happy and is nourishing. And seeing food as nourishing, I think is a good thing to think about.
I think that's a great message. And you made me think of something. So one of my dearest bosses that I ever had once said to me, nobody on their deathbed is going to say, I wish I worked more. Right. And so that was a lesson. But similarly, nobody on their deathbed is going to say, I wish I lost those 20 pounds. Like, who's thinking of that when it's the end, when it's, there's no time left? Mm-hmm. There's so many other things that we might be wishing we did if we didn't do them. But the weight loss topic is never going to come into play as a priority in that time. So it's, between now and, I always say between now and dead, how do you want to live your life a bit?
Yeah.
It's true. It really is true. So good message. This has been a great conversation. I thank you for your time, and we will put all of your links out there for folks, but where are you most active?
Yeah, probably the best place to find me and find out more about what I do is through my website, which is just my name, joanneedinberg.com. And I've got, other podcast interviews linked there. I have information about my programs. My 12-week one-on-one coaching program is my primary way that I work with people. Because I love to work one-on-one, because you get, these issues are so personal and it's different for everyone. So there's information about that there. I do a Ditch Diet Culture book club. The information is there about that. That's free. You can get on my email list and get my newsletter, and I'll share, tips and these interviews and, info about my offerings. And so, that's the best place to find me. And I do have an Instagram account and a YouTube, but, you can find links on my website for all of that.
Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. I've enjoyed our conversation.
I have as well. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Message in the Middle. I hope you found something in this conversation that reminded you that you're not alone, and that midlife isn't about winding down. It's about waking up. You're not done. You're just becoming. If this episode speaks to you at all, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And if you're enjoying the show, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave a review. It really helps other women find this community and this podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself.